we have put all of Colorado's power needs in the intermittent basket. Are we absolutely insane? If we don't include nuclear power in our generating portfolio, Colorado, mark my words on this, Colorado will be reliably left behind.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to PowerGab, your go-to show for all things energy and environmental policy in Colorado. I'm Jake Fogleman, joined as always by my co-host Amy Cooke. In this week's episode, we teased it a little bit on the last episode if you saw that, but we want to talk about some exciting developments that are already happening at the Capitol. The legislative session just kicked off this week as we're recording, but you know, a ton of bad news has come from that, but there is some good news because a bill that we've been keeping our eye on got introduced already and in a new form than it has been in past sessions.
Yeah, this is actually really exciting. And for those of you who don't know, what happens is legislators are told they have a deadline by which they have to get their first, they can get up to 5 bills and have the argument as to whether or not that's too many bills. We'll save that for another day, but they can have up to 5 bills and they have deadlines. So the first deadline is usually maybe the second week of December, middle of December, something like that. And then you have your final bills, and the deadline for that is probably maybe next week would be, and listen, they get plenty of late bills too, but these are just your first 5 bills. What are you thinking of? So this is really exciting because House Bill 25, the year 25, 1040. So you'll hear us refer to it as HB 1040, likely. That means this bill. And our friend Larry Liston is back, State Senator Larry Liston, on the Republican side, and he has partnered with Dylan Roberts, Democrat from he represents Northwestern Colorado, on the Senate side. And then Alex Valdez from Denver, Democrat, and then Ty Winter from Southeastern Colorado on the Republican side. And it's I'm almost giddy about this. Concerning the inclusion of nuclear energy as a source of clean energy. If I had sound effects, you would hear, champagne popping. And the reason is and I know what you're thinking. We've heard this before.
Right.
This is a broken record. They've done this before. Well, there are a couple of things. One, Chris Hansen's gone.
Yep.
He was one of the largest voices opposed to nuclear. The other one that's gone is Kevin Priola, and he was no help. But the other thing is, this bill has 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats as co-primes.
Yep.
So I mean, I feel like we're getting somewhere. I mean, sometimes things take a while, right? The first time you introduce a bill, it's unusual that it passes. Mm-hmm. So a new idea, it shouldn't be a new idea, but it is a new idea to Colorado.
Right.
It shouldn't be, it's not a new idea to the rest of the country, but it is to Colorado. So this bill essentially says we're going to consider nuclear energy what it is as clean energy, a clean energy source. The important thing is, so what does that mean?
Right. So the reason that this is important, because I mean, if you're not in the weeds in this stuff like we are, wonking out over it, but you might think, well, what's the big deal, right?
Right.
I already know nuclear is clean. What's the matter if the statutes show that it's clean? Well, under Colorado statutory law, only defined eligible energy resources or clean energy resources, it's used interchangeably. Only those resources that are named under that are eligible for particular financing programs that the state has set up, and those are the resources that are required to be used by the state's utilities to meet the climate goals. And so if nuclear isn't included in that, it creates a lot of uncertainty as to whether Colorado could ever include nuclear in its portfolio and have that count. If you're a nuclear provider, why would you ever propose a nuclear project in a state that you say, by 2050, that might be illegal. That's a ton of capital to invest in an energy source that may or may not be legally valid. That's why this is a potentially very important bill, even though it sounds so modest in its scope.
Right. And by the way, the life cycle, or the lifespan of nuclear is much longer than it is for wind, solar, and batteries. So if you find out that, I'm going to invest in nuclear right now, oh, great. Well, in 25 years, it's going to be, it could be, to your point, illegal or not considered, can't be considered part of the portfolio of clean energy. It's important that it be included. And what we love about this, Jake, is the legislative declaration. There are ways that they could have done it better, but they did a pretty good job on it. Do you want to start off?
Sure, yeah. We were talking before we started recording, kind of laughing that a lot of this stuff sounds like our writings over the years, stuff we've put in our papers and our blog posts and our op-eds.
Sounds like PowerGab.
Right, it essentially does sound like PowerGab. So the first thing that it kicks off with is establishing sort of the energy predicament that the state finds itself in. It says Colorado's estimated electricity peak demand is projected to double in the next 5 years. The current path to eliminating greenhouse gas emissions includes only the use of wind and solar power and battery storage. Providing more options for generating electricity in Colorado will lead to a less expensive and more reliable path to eliminating greenhouse gas emissions.
Can we let's stop right there?
Yeah, I
Perfect.
Totally agree.
Perfect. So providing more options for generating electricity in Colorado will lead to less expensive and a more reliable path to eliminating greenhouse gas emissions. Now, what other states have done is prioritize reliability and affordability and said, we will leave it to the utilities and the Utilities Commission to come up with what that mixture needs to look like.
Mm-hmm.
But we want a low carbon, or in some cases, totally decarbonization of our electric grid. You just have to, but the way you get there is up to you.
Yeah.
So Colorado is sort of backing into it by saying, if we have more options, we would say, don't name resources. Just leave it. But Colorado has their wind and solar and battery in statute. And to their point, they're absolutely right on this. The lawmakers are right. Having more options gives utilities more options to meet climate goals, and they can do it in a more reliable, more affordable way. That is music to our ears, and it is what we have spent the last year on this show talking about.
I'll say it sounds a little bit like a series of 3 research papers that came out from a excellent think tank in Denver, Colorado.
Yeah, right. Who knew? Go ahead.
I was going to say, and getting beyond that sort of table setting, it mentions the merits of nuclear energy. It says it can produce higher quantities of clean energy with a smaller land footprint than other clean energy sources. Again, something that we've touched on all the time. It's just an incredible amount of power on a tiny space of land, so it preserves Colorado's beautiful landscape. It says also, small modular nuclear reactors can replace coal power plants while maintaining the number of jobs in the communities in which coal power plants are located. Another benefit that we've talked about before, doing the coal to nuclear transaction, as it's called. I don't know if there's a few other ones that you want to touch on.
Yeah, actually, one of the things it talks about too is just the amount of jobs that it can employ. So this is an area where veterans. So just FYI, in case those of you living or who have relatives in Washington, in the state of Washington, they actually have a number of small reactors all along their coastline, because that's where their nuclear submariner fleet, many of them are off the coast of Washington. You also have them off the coast of Virginia with aircraft carriers. Let's put it this way. The naval fleet is nuclear.
Yep.
It's just nuclear. So if you're at a naval base, chances are there is a nuclear reactor somewhere near you. So what happens is these highly trained veterans that are operating small reactors as part of the naval fleet, they are skilled, they're educated, and they've been trained by the best, right, by the Navy, and they come out and they're looking for jobs. Those are the kinds of people that you want in Colorado or any state, because those are the guys who can operate a plant.
That's a fantastic point, and it's not just veterans; it's also the coal power plant.
Yeah,
operators.
That's right. That's exactly
the folks
right.
that, and without this scenario would just be sort of left in the lurch once the coal plants are statutorily, or in some cases by regulation, required to shut down. And those folks have decades of experience working in fairly similar infrastructure. There's some differences, but similar infrastructure, running a power plant that have all this, decades of knowledge that can be put to perfectly good use with a coal to nuclear transition.
I actually think they undersell the labor force that could be from this. Yep. They say this is in the legislative declaration, which just means these are some of the arguments that they're looking at. Yep. That's what the legislative declaration means. Talks about the development of small modular reactors can create up to 900 jobs lasting up to 4 years, as well as up to 300 permanent jobs. So it isn't, to your point, it isn't just veterans, but these coal plant operators in northwestern Colorado and then in southeastern Colorado. But that whole transition, I think you could have not just, beyond the coal to nuclear transition, you start looking at nuclear reactors for baseload power, because that's what nuclear is, with a capacity factor at 92.5%. 0.5%. In this, they say 92.7. I won't quibble over 0.2%, but think about that. 92.5, 92.7% capacity factor. That means it can generate power roughly that amount of time. Whereas if you look at a solar panel, you're lucky if you get 22, 25%. Wind is a little higher than that, but it is a baseload workhorse. So I think we're not only will do our coal operators have jobs that would be available for them and high-paying jobs.
Good point.
But also you can bring in, if we build nuclear to the amount that we need, we'll be a place that will be attractive for a highly skilled workforce. I mean, this isn't just a reliability and affordability piece. It's also an economic development piece.
That is a fantastic point. I didn't even consider that, because you talk about the 300 permanent jobs that it takes to actually operate the plant. That's inside the fence of the actual power plant, those jobs. But you're absolutely right. That then creates knock-on effects of economic investment in the community. Maybe a data center operator says, oh, they've got a nuclear plant there. I'd like to invest and build data centers there. Maybe a manufacturing concern decides, well, I'd like to build, a factory somewhere, but I really need a place that has abundant power. Oh, look, this little community in Colorado has a nuclear power plant. I can totally invest and build a factory there. It creates all these unseen potential benefits just by doing this one transition. So
right, and because it's reliable power is. I was speaking to a small group the other day, and I said, if Colorado doesn't include nuclear power in its generating portfolio, if it refuses to do it, I kept saying that the hostility at the state capitol is weird. Like it's just weirdly hostile. And if you saw our last show, you know that it was like being on a bender. It was it was Progressive Palooza on a bender. They were just ignoring things that they had their own reality, their alternate reality. But if we don't include nuclear power in our generating portfolio, Colorado, mark my words on this, Colorado will be reliably left behind. States all around us will be doing it. We will not have reliable power. Data centers aren't going to come here. If they need reliable power, I mean, that they just do. They have to have reliable power. They won't come here if we don't have a reliable grid. And the current trajectory is limited, because look at that, wind and solar and batteries. That's your only option. We have currently, we have put all of Colorado's power needs in the intermittent basket. Are we absolutely insane? I mean, who would do that? Well, that's the trajectory that we're on. This changes everything.
Yeah, absolutely has the potential to change everything. We've covered it in previous shows, obviously, the premium that these big industrial concerns and data centers place on reliable power, and the fact that Colorado, even though there are data centers coming here, we're not even in like the top half of states right now that are seeing data center demand, because our power supply is increasingly getting intermittent. And just your point about the weirdness of the hostility to nuclear,
Yeah.
this sort of last little bit in the legislative declaration talks about what an outlier we are, because it's currently the single largest source, nuclear, that they're referring to, of carbon-free electricity in the United States and around the world. There's 94 nuclear reactors in the United States alone, generating about 50% of the country's carbon-free electricity. So it's not even like this is a theoretical thing that Colorado would be, first of its kind. There are 94 existing reactors currently out there right now producing 50% of the country's clean electricity. And by the way, they're doing it reliably.
Yeah, and I can attest to that. My temporary deployment to North Carolina, 30% of North Carolina's, its power comes from nuclear, and it is just a workhorse. I pulled up the other day when it was kind of cold and snowy. I pulled up the real-time generation for Xcel's Public Service Company of Colorado, Xcel's generating area. I pulled it up. Now, it was using roughly 5,500 megawatts. That was what demand was. And remember, it was cold and it was it was snowy. 5,500 megawatts. It was what was keeping us warm. It was coal and natural gas. Those two together accounted for just over 5,000 of the 5,500 megawatts. You know where solar or where wind was? It was at 70.
Wow.
70. So
for context, let me jump in there. We have about 5,000 megawatts of installed wind in the state of Colorado. So
it wasn't showing up.
Yeah.
It was not there. So what are you going to do? You say, well, we'll bring on the batteries. Well, hopefully, wind comes up within the next, 4 hours. Otherwise, you've drained all your batteries.
Yep.
And if it's at night, solar isn't there either.
Yep.
So this is really important. And in fact, it's so important that it is in the declaration. And they say because nuclear has such a high capacity factor, 92.7, I'll use their number, 92.7%, utilizing nuclear energy as a source of clean energy will help Colorado prevent future brownouts and blackouts. That's important because what do I always say? Get a generator, and I said in the last one, we're hoarding them at the Cooke household. We're up to 5. My husband went and bought one. Apparently he didn't think we had enough. We got another battery. It is a way to prevent blackouts and brownouts. And we also talked about the fact that we suspected the state knows that they have a problem, but they don't want to say it publicly.
Right.
So they were doing things like, for instance, giving Medicaid patients that are on life-sustaining medical equipment, giving them battery backup so they don't have brownouts and blackouts. Or when there is a brownout or blackout, they have something to keep the power going to their medical equipment. Also, the Colorado Energy Office acknowledging the most expensive way to decarbonize the state is wind, solar, and batteries. And then saying, and it also barely meets reliability metrics. And I just want to say something about that too. It says on here, on its own, nuclear energy has a 92.7 capacity factor, which refers to the percentage of time that an electricity generating source is able to generate electricity. I know it sounds repetitive, but it is a much higher capacity factor than for all other generation sources, a much higher capacity factor. Remember, Colorado at this moment has put all of its reliability of the grid into the wind, solar, and battery basket. It is a disaster waiting to happen, and it's not saying that in the declaration, but it is saying all the reasons why we have to have nuclear. Essentially, it's to avoid disaster, we need to have nuclear.
Right. Doesn't say it in so many words, but that's the point it's driving home.
Yeah.
Which makes me wonder, just taking a step back from the actual text of the declaration in the bill, will we see its fate be a little different this time? So you mentioned it's been introduced in the past. We've talked about it on the show. This would be the third time that this particular bill has been reintroduced. The previous 2 times, it was defeated in its very first committee hearing. But there are some things that give me a little bit of hope. You mentioned at the top of the show, the past 2 times, it was just Senator Liston on his own. He didn't have a co-prime.
Yeah.
He didn't even have another Republican co-prime. It was just him on his own. The fact that this time he has one in each chamber and a Democrat with him in each chamber tells me, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't have special insight into the will of the rest of the Colorado General Assembly. Tells me that there is a building momentum, bipartisan, to see something happen this time. And you just have to say this has a better chance than it's ever had in the state of Colorado before, I think.
I think you're 100% right. And culture is downstream politics. We have to drag politics along. Culturally, Colorado supports nuclear. We've done the polling on it. We commissioned a poll on it, and Colorado supports nuclear. And by the way, that's bipartisan support, and especially among young people. Young people who are connected to everything and have to have their phones working at all times. They know the importance of reliable power because, by the way, they've never been without it, right? Like those of us who are my age, and living out in the country and growing up when I did, I remember as a kid, we were way out in the country, and if we had a big storm, and I remember this one time we were living up in Wisconsin, we had a big, huge storm. And we were out of power for, 8 or 9 days. And it was just, you played outside.
Right.
I mean, it just was what it was. You don't have that situation. Young people today have not had to go through that. So a reliable grid for them is hugely important. They also don't have the baggage that many people of a certain age have. 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and then that horrible movie, The China Syndrome, where it actually, so there isn't the baggage of that kind of history. And actually, and I'm going to plug something that we're doing at the Independence Institute. We have a paper coming out on the history, Colorado's history with nuclear energy and uranium mining and all of that, and sort of say, listen, this stuff did happen. Colorado did. Rocky Flats was real, all of that. But what the anti-nuclear forces did is they took that, they equated things like nuclear weapons with nuclear generation. And it's not the same. It is not even close. And Mark Udall in 2009 said, listen, if you care about climate change, nuclear energy must be part of the solution. So I'm jazzed about this. And one of the things we'll do on the show for sure is let you know when it will be in committee. If you want to testify, and speaking of that, this bipartisan coalition and bipartisan support for it, and going down and testifying, we will certainly be there for that. But also, we have an event that we're doing with what I would call the Colorado nuclear community, the bipartisan community. Colorado Nuclear Alliance, you heard from Mark Kinnaman when he was on the show about it. We're going to do an event, a live stream event on February 6th. It'll be at the Independence Institute offices, but it's going to be more like it's going to be more live stream in the sense of we're going to blast it out to all of Colorado. We want to show people that there is bipartisan support across the state for this, and environmentalists to free market economists. There is support for nuclear energy. It is, and the place that it doesn't have support is in the Senate Energy Committee. So it's like they're an outlier. We are not.
Yeah. I couldn't have said that any better myself. Do you want to do any additional takeaways? Because I think you hit the nail on the head there for our listeners.
Yeah, well, so actually, mark your calendar for February 6th, because we have an event. So do that. Also, keep your calendar open for testifying at the Capitol. I encourage everybody, do that. This is your chance to make your voice heard. And I think it won't be just on this bill. Sources at the Capitol say there are more there are more nuclear bills out there. I think we've had a couple last year and they all got killed, but I think you'll see more that, again, has Democrat and Republican support. So mark your calendars for February 6th. It'll be an evening event, probably 6:30 to 8, but we'll get more details on that. Second is, we'll talk more about the Senate Energy Committee is going to could prove to be a problem, but we'll keep you posted on that. And three, I hope I don't have to say this anymore. I really, I'm going to say get a generator, but I am hopeful that I'll have a new tagline.
From your lips to God's ears. That does it for us on another episode of PowerGab. If you like what you saw this episode, you can head over to powergab.org to check out our entire back catalog. We produce new episodes every single week. We're also available wherever you get your audio shows, whether that's Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And if you want to suggest future show topics or a guest that you'd like to see us interview on the show, you can send those over to info@powergab.org. We'd love to hear from you guys. But until next week, we'll see you.